Yo, what is going on, everybody? My name is Dominic, and today I'm giving you guys my top 10 favorite directors of all time. If that sounds interesting, let's hop right into the video. Yo, what is up, guys? My name is Dominic and I am a film-based content creator here on YouTube. If you love everything to do with film and movie YouTube videos, you're definitely going to love my channel. I make everything from movie reviews, movie rankings, director rankings, and even just the occasional list like this from time to time, and I post multiple times weekly, so you're definitely not going to want to miss any of those videos. You should definitely subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you are the first person to know whenever I upload a brand new video. With all of that being said, today I'm obviously going over my top 10 favorite directors of all time. I did actually make a video like this a while back, and to this day it is still getting some traction. It's getting some views, a couple comments, which to me is a little scary because that video was not very good at all. Some of my opinions still somewhat stand from that video, but there are a few opinions of mine that aged pretty horribly and I do not agree. So honestly, don't even bother looking at that old list unless you want to just see what a bad video of mine looks like. But yeah, this is going to be my new updated list. Obviously this can change in the future. The more I see from more filmmakers, the more filmmakers I explore. But currently, as of right now, in June 2021, these are my top 10 favorite directors on a specific criteria. So I'm not just going simply based off of one thing only. It's going to be a mixture of my enjoyment of their films, just how I feel about them. 2, the style that they bring, how unique is it, how distinct is it, and how much do I enjoy it. And 3, how much has that filmmaker inspired me to become more creative, be a better critic, and maybe even to make films of my own. With a mixture of all those 3 different criteria, here are my top 10 favorite filmmakers of all time. So for number 10, I have my boy Jean-Luc Godard. He is a fantastic French director and is one of the most popular directors of the French New Wave. This is a filmmaker that I've only seen, as of right now, 3 films from, but I cannot wait to check out more of his works because of how amazing he has been so far. My favorite has to be Breathless so far from him. I think it's just an absolutely incredible film. It's made super well, really interesting, honestly pretty fun and entertaining movie to watch. But aside from that, Godard has one of the most distinct and enjoyable styles of filmmaking that I personally have ever seen. And it is really apparent in all 3 of the films that I've seen from him so far. So I'm really excited to check out more of his. And another thing on top of that is he's an extremely influential director for me. He had a big influence on who I am as a critic, and honestly he's influenced me to be more creative and honestly kind of want to start making movies kind of like he does. So that's a huge thing, and I honestly think he probably would be higher up on this list had I seen more from him. So unfortunately he's only number 10, but he does make the list. Coming in at number 9, I have Damien Chazelle. He obviously is a fantastic director, but honestly to me he's not higher because he still has stuff to prove. He has 2 phenomenal movies, being Whiplash and La La Land, which are both very close, but my favorite from him is La La Land. And then you got 2 lesser known films. One is Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench, which I haven't seen and I don't know many people who have. And then obviously you got First Man, which is known for being a film that's decently well known but nowhere close to Whiplash and La La Land, where I haven't seen either of those, but he only has 4 films under his belt. Even though he has 2 arguable masterpieces in my opinion, I don't think he has enough under his belt to be considered one of the best in my personal opinion, but he does make it into the top 10 because of how phenomenal Whiplash and La La Land are, and they're just films that are incredibly enjoyable stylistically as well, because they both have a decently similar tone and themes that they convey, and while not like one specific thing that is recurring throughout those films, They are very noticeably Damien Chazelle movies, if that makes sense. And he's just obviously a filmmaker that I'm super excited to see what he does in the future, because obviously he has two of my favorite films of all time, and obviously a style that I love, so I can't wait to see what he has in store. Number 8 for me is Denis Villeneuve, the French-Canadian filmmaker. I haven't gotten too much into his works yet, I will admit, but I have seen 3. 2 of the 3 are absolute masterpieces. 2 of them literally are in my top 5 favorite films of all time. And then the other one is Arrival, which is still a great movie. I think that he does have a pretty good style down. I don't think it's incredibly distinct like a lot of the directors that will be on this list, but it is enough to be distinguishable as a Denis Villeneuve film. On top of that, obviously, if I think that 2 of his 3 films are masterpieces, obviously my enjoyment of his movies are extremely high. Blade Runner 2049 and Prisoners are both phenomenal movies. I adore them, and honestly, they're just so amazing. I'm probably gonna make their own videos separate in the future at some point, but I still have to, write scripts and stuff for those videos, so those will be coming, but I'm not quite sure when. And other than that, Prisoners and Blade Runner 2049 both look phenomenal. Obviously, Roger Deakins is just something else, but this cinematography, the way these films look, how beautiful and honestly kind of eerie they are, make me very inspired to critique films in a different way, and they kind of just fuel my creativity as a creative in general. Number 7, we got Martin Scorsese. I have seen all of his films actually. If you haven't seen my Martin Scorsese ranked video, it will be in the iCard up above. I don't fully agree with that ranking anymore, but I'm definitely not going to make an updated one anytime soon because it wasn't that long ago, and it's not a terrible video by any means, so I will probably make one in the future at some point, but definitely not soon. So check that video out if you haven't already. I think it's a pretty solid video regardless of how much my opinions have changed, but I do think Martin Scorsese is a fantastic director. Obviously, he has a very distinct style that you all probably know of. Like, if you throw any Scorsese film like on a TV or something, you probably would know that it's a Scorsese movie because of how strong most of his films are stylistically speaking. And for the films that are up there in my ranking of his, are very enjoyable. They're all great movies. His high points are extremely high. He has some amazing movies up there. I would argue all of my top 10 Scorsese films are very good. He does have some stinkers down at the bottom, I will admit, but when you make as many films as he has, you're bound to have some of those. So I don't really hold that too much against him. But regardless of that, I think stylistically speaking and speaking from enjoyment as well as some inspiration, Martin Scorsese has been a very prevalent figure in my life as a movie critic and just a general movie watcher. Number 6, I have Hayao Miyazaki. He is obviously the filmmaker behind a bunch of Studio Ghibli films, and those are the ones obviously I've seen from him, being Spirited Away, Porco Rosso, and My Neighbor Totoro. Miyazaki arguably has one of the strongest styles on this list, being a sort of whimsical and out-of-body sort of experience that makes you feel more childlike than any other filmmaker I've ever seen, and in the best way possible. You could argue that feeling like a child while watching a film is not what you want. It would be very distracting, disturbing, whatever. But I personally think with these sort of whimsical stories that he tells, I think this childlike feeling is very good, and it definitely fits the tone that the films are going for the most part. They are very creative and very heavy on world building, and I think that is what I enjoy a ton about his films, and I just absolutely love them. There isn't a Miyazaki film that I've yet to dislike. I honestly think all of them are very good. I think my least favorite one is Howl's Moving Castle, but that is still a good movie. And he just has some phenomenal characters, and they're just incredibly enjoyable movies overall. and he's honestly pretty inspiring. While if I was to be a filmmaker, I wouldn't do animation. I think that overall his style and just his pure enjoyment that I get from his films are very inspirational to me and just incredibly enjoyable. At number 5, we got the guy behind this movie, Pulp Fiction. That would be Quentin Tarantino. Pulp Fiction is my favorite film from his. I've obviously seen all of his movies if you've seen that ranking video. Again, another one that my opinions don't fully stand from that video, and I am definitely actually planning on rewatching all of his movies to re-rank them, but as of now you have that video to look at. And I think that Tarantino here is another one that has an extremely strong style. If you've seen a Tarantino film, I'd argue he maybe has the strongest style on this list so far. It is very distinct, very enjoyable. All of his movies are good in my opinion, at least, and he honestly is an extreme inspiration to me. He was the first director, I would argue, that I really got into, and for that he's someone that still to this day has a massive influence on my sort of critiquing and my future filmmaking endeavors, because while I don't think I'll ever be able to make a Tarantino film, I will be able to make hopefully a film that has some Tarantino-esque aspects, or I could only hope to make a movie half as good as he's made. Number 4, we got this guy right up here, Alfred Hitchcock. I have this box set from him because I just absolutely love him as a director. I think technically speaking, a lot of his films aren't phenomenally well made. Like, they're obviously really great, but they're not like some of the best looking films or some of the best edited films, you know, any of that sort of stuff. But I think they're all incredibly well written. They have fantastic stories and characters that are extremely captivating, and that is basically his style. They're very dark, there are a lot of thrillers, a lot of mystery, and just a well put together story, well crafted. That is Hitchcock's style. A lot of people's style, like Denis Villeneuve, who generally speaking is known for being very visual, and there are obviously other directors like this. I think that Hitchcock actually stands out in that way because his style, in my opinion, is just really well crafted films that are extremely entertaining, intense, and very just well put together. Coming in at number 3, we have the filmmaker behind my previous favorite movie of all time, and that is Wes Anderson. Obviously my favorite of his being Fantastic Mr. Fox, because I would argue it's tied for my favorite movie of all time right now, but technically speaking, Letterboxd and stuff doesn't allow ties, so it is my second favorite film. Phenomenal movie, probably the strongest style on this list. Obviously, if you know the name Wes Anderson, you associate his name with sort of symmetrical shots, pastel colors, very dry, deadpan delivery of dialogue and humor, and just very quirky, weird, and odd stories that he tells. But these are all things, especially when they're put together into one, that I love to watch. His movies are just incredibly entertaining. They are very, very strong stylistically. Obviously, as I said, I love the style, which in turn is very inspirational to me as a creative, as a aspiring filmmaker. While I don't think you could replicate this style necessarily, it's one that could definitely be inspirational to people like me. And I just absolutely love all of his movies. My least favorite of his is still like a 7 out of 10. I still love basically all of his movies. He's just an amazing filmmaker and someone that I am heavily inspired by and has been one of my favorites for a long time. Number 2, we got the man himself, Stanley Kubrick. I mean, if you guys know me, you knew that this was coming. It was definitely going to be higher up on my list. Stanley Kubrick is, I would argue, the greatest filmmaker of all time. Shout out to that video. It is the most viewed video on my channel. It is a video essay on why I think Stanley Kubrick is the greatest filmmaker of all time. So if you want to go more into detail on why I love him so much as a director, as a filmmaker, definitely check out that video because it puts my thoughts really well. But I will explain in short, Obviously very inspirational to me because he's enough for me to make a whole video on. I think all of but like 3 of his movies are fantastic. He has some of the best made films I've ever seen in my entire life, and that stands to this day. He has probably the most masterpieces out of any director I've ever seen. I would argue he has like 3 to 4 masterpieces, which is just an incredible feat. And I just absolutely enjoy watching all of his movies. The one single downside I have to Stanley Kubrick is a lot of his films are long and they're not very rewatchable for the most part, but these films are just so incredibly good, and rewatchability doesn't take too much of a factor into this, and these are just absolutely phenomenal. He had to be this high on my list. But coming in at number 1, if you know me, you knew this was coming. My number 1 favorite filmmaker of all time is Jacques Tati. Obviously, my favorite of his being Playtime. Again, I have a video on why I love Playtime so much. I'm still planning on making a Jacques Tati in general video on why I adore him as a director. I was first introduced to him by Karsten Runquist. You guys probably know him from a What I Watched video, and ever since then I've watched all of his movies multiple times and have just fallen in love with him. He has my favorite style out of any filmmaker. His style is very atmospheric, a lot of wide shots, barely any close-ups, and for his type of comedy, he does physical and like sort of slapstick comedy. This is a very awesome style to have because you can have these long wide shots and have multiple different gags going in at once. I would argue this is the one time that rewatchability does factor in because of how complex a lot of these films are. On surface level, they're very simple stories. There's not much to them. They seem very straightforward, but on rewatch, you notice these small little details like going on in the background or another thing happening that you didn't notice before. And it's stuff like this that makes me count rewatchability as a factor, because if a movie is so rewatchable to a point where you have a different viewing experience every time and love it just as much every single time, that has to go for something. Obviously, all of his movies are incredibly enjoyable. I don't think I've given any of them lower than a 4 or a 4.5 out of 5. They're all so good. I've rewatched all of them at least 3 times. Playtime probably closer to 10 at this point. I just adore his movies, and he is the most inspirational filmmaker to me as a critic and as an aspiring filmmaker to this day. It is not even close. Jacques Tati is my favorite director of all time. And that is going to do it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed, definitely make sure to leave a like on the video. Also subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell if you want to know every single time I upload a brand new video. That was my top 10 favorite directors of all time. If you want to leave your list in the comment section, I would love to hear who some of your favorite filmmakers are and who are some of the most inspirational to you as creatives. I would absolutely love to hear your lists. I will make sure to reply to all of these comments. And that is basically going to do it for the video, guys. I will see you all in the next one.